Hi, and welcome to another episode of Data Futurology. In Data Futurology, we speak to C-level executives in the data analytics, data science, and machine learning space, and we cover the topics and the challenges that these leaders are thinking about. So the idea is to bring everyone different perspectives about how we can do things better in our day-to-day work, and give you also use cases with new ideas to bring in innovation into your organizations, and make sure that you're helping you keep up to date with everything that's happening in this industry, which is moving at lightning speed. My name is Felipe Flores. I'm your host. Thank you so much for being here today. And today we got a super important, super interesting topic, which is around monetizing all your data, all of your enterprise data, so across the organization, and monetizing all of it. And this is to advance the value creation from data. And for this, it's a topic that a lot of people have been sending in questions about. It's an area of focus for a lot of the audience in terms of both how do we get coverage across the entire enterprise when we're looking to get more value out of our data, and then is how can we monetize that data or that value that we're unlocking, monetizing it for the organization and helping our clients and our partners. It's something that needs to go into every good data strategy going forward. For that, we have Stuart Long, a very special guest today. He's a CTO at HPE, which is Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And I can't think of anyone better to discuss this topic with us. So Stuart, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Yeah, very good, my friend. How are you?
Doing great. I've been looking forward to this chat. I am very excited that now we get to spend some time together, and I get to pick your brain for everyone in the audience. It's excellent. So Stuart, maybe to kick us off, could you tell us about your role at HPE, what your remit is, and your focus?
Yeah, so I sit across our enterprise group, so CTO for Enterprise, and I look across all our different product portfolios and then pull together solutions for our different customer sets. So we have a number of different industry verticals. So we look at things like, public, health, education, finance, retail, mining. So we are now looking at how we develop the solutions from our product portfolio across all of those different stacks.
Super broad remit. It must be so interesting to work across and help so many different types of clients in their varied stages of evolution and maturity in this space. How you've been enjoying that?
Yeah, it's great. So let's just say there's not too many boring days, right? So when you're not challenged, or there isn't a new sort of topic that you haven't thought about in the way that the customer is trying to think about it. So I said it's good, it's challenging, really keeps you on your toes mentally.
Oh man, I love it. And what is something that you're seeing in the market at the moment? Something that people are either wanting to solve or looking into more and more these days?
So it's customers using data. So, there's been a number of sort of analogies around that data is the new digital oil. And so what customers are trying to do is really get a better understanding of what assets they have and then what value they can get from those assets. Mm. So for many years, I think people have stored information hoping that it'll one day become useful. Mm-hmm. And what they're now seeing is, the next sort of level of competitive sort of differentiation, how you compete better versus the other players in the market, is really using your own data better. As we expand on that, what we're now starting to see is how you can share that data and get insights not only within your own organization, but across organizations. And that can often then help, economies, the whole social areas, especially in government, around how we can then offer services to different type of people and almost, customize those services for the individual users.
Man, that is fantastic. That is taking the need and expanding the value that you can get out of it significantly. So not only being able to link the data and use the data within an organization, but be able to link it across organizations. That sounds like the future, the way of the future. Yeah, that is fantastic. And how are you guys or how are you helping people bring that to reality? That sounds like a fantastic aim.
Yeah, so what we're now seeing is there are different ways of you're looking at sort of that data pipeline. Mm-hmm. And so data pipelines in the old days used to be sort of, I'll say, singular directions. So we used to basically have a transaction, we would capture that transaction, we'd store it in a database. As another event, we would then go through and report on that, or run a different analytics across that, and eventually you'd move it into a data warehouse and maybe look at it a bit differently. These days, the data streams are what I'm calling omnidirectional. Mm-hmm. So as the data is created, there are a number of different streams that split off that, and people start looking at not only the data itself, but how the data was created. It's all the metadata around that. And the easiest way to explain that is the whole behavioral analytics type approach, which is, I not only want to know a transaction occurred, I want to know why that transaction occurred, or was that a normal transaction? And so specifically with security, you'll see this all the time about not only capturing the transaction, but then looking to see if that was a normal transaction fitted within the norms of that user or, that profile.
And that is, that's fantastic, because that's the, the dream or the standard that so many organizations are aspiring to or chasing, in order to be able to capture those things when they happen, being able to act on the data more rapidly as it's first coming in. How can organizations start to take steps that way, or what can they be considering to bring this into reality?
So what we're now seeing is sort of smarter edge devices. So a lot of people are predicting that the analytics will start moving towards the edge. Now, probably a different type of analytics. So we'll be doing those pre-filtering type environments. So what we're seeing is the growth of all these, digitally enabled devices. And so a huge amount of data is being produced. Now, a lot of that data is normal, but some of them is abnormal. So how do I actually start to identify events very close to the source and then start to act on those events? So that's what we're starting to see. We've got a whole new range of analytic devices that fit very closely with these new sort of cameras, etc. So video is a huge area where we see the cameras just getting smarter and smarter, and the resolution is getting higher and higher. So the things you can now detect at those levels can be almost even used for things like health and diagnostic environments. So you can actually start to actually look at a pulse rate through through the eye these days. So you can actually start to tell whether a customer or a patient's heart rate is normal through basically a video camera.
Man, this is so exciting. So I know that you guys have been thinking about these type of problems for a while, in terms of moving the analytics to the edge, making it actionable, being able to link data across the organization and across multiple organizations. And you've got something that is very exciting that we can discuss a little bit in terms of how organizations can look to implement this. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what it looks like?
Yeah, sure. So we'll start off with Gaia X, which is a new solution that's coming out of Europe. So if you guys have looked at what's happening in Europe around GDPR, around the whole privacy regulations, it's now about federating your data and then making that data available to people, but still within your control. So that's a framework we're basically signed up to, because what we've realized is you can't do this alone. You really need an ecosystem of partners and products to start to do that. And around that, then we've built a whole range of products to do what we call federated data analytics. So this allows you to basically look where your data is and start to then understand where you want to analyze that data and what data flows you need to provide, at the edge all the way through, and how you want to basically store and categorize that data. So that's a framework we've been developing. There's now a number of different architectures. And underneath those architectures, we're now developing products that fit nicely within that to enable the customers to pick this up and start to look at, what I'll call a reference architecture from HPE around how to deploy these new systems.
Exciting. And what would be some use cases that would be enabled or powered by this sort of next wave of technology?
So this is where, again, in every industry start to see this happening. In our own industry, we're looking at what we call AI-assisted ops. So we're now looking at the behavioral analytics of all of our computer systems. We have a product called InfoSight that starts to not only compare what one customer is doing, but what many customers are doing. And then what we can start to do is understand what is normal behavior of these systems and what's approaching abnormal. And what this will start to allow us to do is predict events occurring. So if someone applies a patch and that patch has a negative impact in an environment, we can warn other users with similar environments not to apply that patch until they understand, the outcomes of that. So that's where we start within our own environment. But what we've then taken that is, well, how does this look for things like retail? And what we're starting to see is more and more smarter enabled digital stores. And this is now giving people that ability to do, sort of cashless type checkouts where you basically walk into a store, pick up your items, and you automatically charge them on your account as you do that. So a lot of change across many industries about how they're going to look at this data, but how they will act on that data. And so that will be the key in the future as you look at these digital twins that many customers are now building. That is looking at how you would take your existing processes and move them into a fully digitized environment where you can then start to act upon that data very, very quickly.
Man, that is ace. And there's a lot of I guess, as you were saying before, a lot of processing that is happening on the edge, on a lot through devices that customers need to be doing the analytics almost on site, right? So essentially, and how do you see that working?
So the best example we give you is autonomous vehicles. What you're now seeing is all the circuitry they're building, all the componentry they're building into these new vehicles. And one of the reasons why we have this current shortage of new cars is not enough microprocessors now to build the current technology. And so these will give you many assisted driving functions. And the ability here is to, if you're taking too long to process the data, the event may have already occurred. So if you're approaching an obstacle and you need to slow down, you don't really have a huge amount of time to wait. That latency can be a big issue for you. And so building those systems into the vehicle gives you that ability then to basically move that algorithm close to where the data is and take immediate action. So some of these assisted braking systems you see in many of these vehicles, when they do see an object up ahead, will start to slow the vehicle down, in real time as they see it. Now, moving forward, you can start to see, well, if I'm starting to analyze how people are driving, that may have an impact on the insurance of that vehicle. And the ability then to basically have to drive within certain parameters to maintain a lower premium. Or if you do behave in certain ways, you might find that automatically your premium starts going up because the car is reporting how you're driving back to either the manufacturer who's saying, you shouldn't be driving that high revolutions per minute, or to the insurance company who says, you're putting yourself at a bit of risk in others and you're more likely to have an accident if you drive in this manner.
Man, that is, that's kind of like bringing the Uber star rating to across the board, where you're like, you want to be in your best behavior, because then it helps you in the future. So that's really good. How can people start making the transition from where they are today, which obviously varied levels of maturity from people who are setting up warehouses or working with data warehouses to data lakes, to sort of maybe good and bad experiences with data lakes. How do they start moving into this new world that you're describing?
Yes, it's really starting to understand your data. That's why you see, chief data officer, these type of roles now being created. Within businesses, you've seen many different silos. And so they tended to have their own data built around them. And what you're now seeing is people are wanting that end-to-end view within an organization.
Yes.
And this comes down to things, like large organizations like mining today. It takes a while to mine some ore, sort of in outback Western Australia, move it to a port, and then actually get it onto a ship, to its port. And so that's quite a long supply chain. Within that period of time, the price of oil may go up and down, change, etc. So to be able to understand where your assets are within that whole supply chain, and then be able to optimize, how you load ships, how you basically deliver to that environment, is a key to, profitability and really be able to compete in these new environments.
Yeah, 100%. That's one of the I think one of the most exciting things about being able to enable the digital twins is that you can optimize. So the optimization piece there is key, and we have today in so many industries we have such complex not only supply chains but ecosystems that are they're so intertwined, and that there is no digital representation of how they work, and therefore the optimization is either very difficult or non-existent. I know that in my the case of myself, I work in healthcare, so my day job is in healthcare, and there's such complexity that is largely not digitized and ripe for optimization, and something that could benefit us all. How do you see these type of industries taking on this journey?
Yeah, so it's all around that sort of process automation, and it's all about again coming back to that data. So the key is you need good data input and good data output. So as you say, if a patient's turning up and you've got good data on why they're turning up, their history, etc., you can normally guarantee a good outcome. And then if that data is made available for the next person sort of in that chain, then again, that patient will receive a better level of service than they would if they just turned up and somebody has to go through that whole, tell me about your history, what medications you're taking, all of these different things over and over again. So that's the good part of it. The bad part of it is you have to do that securely. People don't want that personal information being made available elsewhere. And many organizations see a lot of this as their own intellectual property. So that data is, core IP. So how do you do this in a safe and secure way as you're moving, this data between, different providers or different parts of your supply chain, that you're not actually, doing that and making that data, available to people who you'd prefer not to have that.
Those are, it's a new stage in innovation, but definitely has to be done securely. Yeah, it's great that you guys have been thinking that from the start, and that's a really good example in the case of healthcare. I wanted to ask you also, how would that be for government, in the case of where you might have different either levels of government or different areas within government that might need to also leverage the connectivity of data across different organizations. How would that work there?
Yeah, so I think the NDIS has been a great example about how individuals are looking to get services from different levels of government. So you may be on a federal NDIS scheme, but then want to be able to leverage that information to help you get state or local services around that. And that could be a simple thing of getting assisted, transport to a local community health center or a number of these different areas. And what people are finding is they don't want to have to justify the same information multiple times between these different departments. So they're expecting that ability once they have a valid claim, for that claim to be able to be leveraged across all of those different areas.
Yes.
So that's an area where we've started to see a lot more integration between those different levels of government. There's almost been that sort of protective mentality, which I have to build my own data silos and protect those data silos for everyone else. People are now starting to see there's a lot more benefit in sharing that data and then being able to compare and enable services across those different data silos. So, local government, state government, federal government, getting those data models in place, is key for that next level of social service to be rolled out efficiently within sort of the Australian community.
Definitely. That is super exciting. And so then how does that work with Gaia X in this case?
So what we're looking here is a federated data model where you can basically publish the metadata available that you have, and then you can basically have a security and compliance wrapper around that. So you may want to make that data only available to certain other organizations or for certain other purposes. And that ability to control that in a federated environment is typically the key to this new Gaia X type environment. Typically, what we're seeing these days is people have used to give away their data for free. Now they're all starting to understand the value of that data. And things like the GDPR have basically let people understand that once you've given that data away, it's very hard to get back.
Yes.
So in these cases, what you're able to do is get a much better level of control of that data. But what it means is people are now more willing to share this data if they know it's being used for the correct purpose, and if they can basically withdraw their consent at any point of time and the data remains their own. So in Europe, this is quite important because you can imagine that Australia is one large continent, but Europe, there are many countries within that. So how do you share data between those different countries? How do you get better outcomes from health and social initiatives across different countries where you have sovereign data borders? What we can show here is how we can start to set that up, how you can build those ecosystems of data providers, and then be able to efficiently secure and put compliance across the data you're sharing.
That is, well, I feel like that is exactly what Australia needs right now. There's so many industries that where we're discussing how to do data sharing in privacy compliant ways, in security compliant ways, how we can enable a transformation at an industry level to provide better products and services for the Australian population. And I feel that we're stuck trying to find or stitch together ways to do that, but that it often comes down to passing the data around in some way. It can be de-identified, it can be securely, but passing the data around and then giving up that copy of it. Yeah. So it sounds like, from your new world and what you guys are bringing in, it works completely different.
Yeah, so it's that whole federated model. There's previously been a number of different models where you have to move the data to a single point, and they always had costs and risks involved in them. But these newer models allow that more federated piece, and it brings into that whole piece the digital trust. So you may trust an ecosystem for one solution, but you may not trust that moving forward due to an issue or an event occurring. And so this gives the user a lot of control about how they maintain sovereignty over their own data.
That's great. And how granular are the controls that can be applied?
It really comes to the models you're looking to set up. So as you said, you can be de-identifying data, you can be masking data, and you can be putting all those controls in place. And then you can basically be setting time limits or different requirements on that. So people only have access to the fields required for the sort of solution they're looking for. And that then allows a lot of interesting information to be gathered and captured. And what we're now seeing is the other side of that, which is if you're doing something maybe in health and we identified that a person may be at more risk of disease or chronic issues, do you have then a duty to notify that person even if you don't know who they are? And so that's typically one I've had a number of discussions at government levels where you sort of say, if I provided you this information, is there then a obligation for you to tell me if I have a problem or not?
Yes. And are there any emerging views that are being more popular than others?
No, this is one where you have very different views about that ability, and it comes down to, imagine we could basically, based on your current lifestyle, predict your age, or where you would have issues. Are we at if we do that, do we have a requirement to let you know?
Yeah.
So that information may be available today. It may be through just on the apps on your phone, and people say, well, how do you mean? Your use of Uber Eats and the type of food you eat, etc., and a number of these different things. Photos on your phone gives you body mass indexes, all of this, number of steps. If you put all that together, you could get a pretty good understanding of an individual's lifestyle and behavior, and that would then give you an interesting way of saying, well, based on that, here's a life expectancy curve that we see typically around those certain behaviors.
Yes. And that's so with that lens, I really like the view that you guys are taking around decentralizing and federating data across organizations, because in today's world, there's essentially few tech companies that own the vast majority of data. How do you see this? How changing or staying the course? How do you see this into the future?
Yes, I think this is the new way of the future, where things used to be very, very proprietary. So you used to have a lot of processes in the old days. A lot of the ERP systems, you were actually buying process. It was predefined process and data models. Now that meant you were pretty much locked into those predefined process and data models. And as we've seen more open source solutions come in, you started to see the breakdown of those processes and data models. And I think this is where the European Union is coming from with the Gaia X, which is the next level of that social development will be around the more free use of the process and data models. So when we talk about process automation, it's really being able to say, well, great, if you had good quality data, you'd probably a good quality process automation. And so there's not the resources left. We can't be, continuing to try and do things and fail at an industrial level anymore. There's just not enough resources and power and all those other pieces. And so being able to apply, good information, knowing where things has failed, will mean people will not continually go down the same path, wasting time, effort, and resources as they do that.
Yeah, that is great. And one of the things that you mentioned before is that as people go and do this robotic process automation, or maybe even as people move more into DevOps and the MLOps world, there's new capabilities. These are new capabilities that are required for organizations to stay competitive, to stay at the forefront. But often they can exacerbate the problem of having disparate data. So in this case, you guys would be able to help with that as either from the start or as they start to become a pain point. How have you seen that in the market?
Yeah, so what you're starting to see is even bias in data. So if you start off with a data set and that data set has a bias, then of course you'll get a biased outcome out of it. And so maybe what you want to start doing as you develop the new algorithms, and so we do a lot. We believe that DevOps will become data ops, and then you've got the sort of the AI ops, the ML ops, and it really come down to, again, quality data to basically start to build that. And so as you go down that path, you'll then start to see, whether you've got bias in your own data, how you could compare that against other people's data sets, and then be able to pull it together. So great area in that has been the facial recognition piece. And because, different races have different, facial structures, you're starting to see 3 or 4 different, facial recognition systems, all based around specific different areas that they've actually come from. And so being able to look at how do you then pull all that together so you get the best of all of those 4 is a very interesting way of then being able to do, better facial recognition moving forward.
Yeah, that is excellent. And once the data has been federated and started to be brought together, how is the metadata handled, managed? I was particularly interested that in how you were saying that it's not only the data being shared, but along with metadata, with access controls, security, privacy, etc. Yes. But how is the metadata managed in this case?
That's right. So you're basically building up a distributed metadata library as well. And this is where you're now starting to see that different people are interested in the metadata more than the data itself. Yes. And so that can be the whole, behavioral analytics. So user and entity behavioral analytics is quite big in security to determine that, that Joe from HR logged into the finance system at 3 a.m. in the morning. Now, the fact that you were able to log in, that will be logged, but the whole fact it was 3 a.m. in the morning and it wasn't the system you were supposed to be logging into may click off a security requirement as well. Now, you don't want to basically report on that a month later where, your financial records have now been, taken and where that data is going. So all of these different things become of interest around that transactional piece. What you start to do is build up a different metadata on the library. And so the people in security, you'll hear a lot about Splunk and what they're doing around all of the logging pieces. And so that's really around that metadata around every transaction can be captured and analyzed for, the type of transaction. And then around that, there's a whole other sets of data that people are looking at to say, great, is there additional information that can be gleaned, or what becomes personally identifiable? So if I've got a profile on you and then I can basically go through a set of data, can I identify individuals from a randomized set of data? And the more and more you look at it, the more and more we are creatures of habit, and it's quite easy to start to do that. And as you said before, things like the Fitbits, they found that like US government had to ban Fitbits because what they found was certain individuals were basically taking the same running course every morning around secured, locations, etc. So, that individualization of data, or that ability to be personally identifiable, is just becoming more and more easier as you start to look at all the metadata now available around it.
Yeah, right. It was really interesting to hear about. I think it was in the Army, the U.S. Army, that they were having people, doing the same courses and be able to be almost picked out. And I remember back in the day, a long time ago, I worked in telco, and we had information like that you would see a mobile phone number from pinging different cell towers, and this is maybe 15 years ago. You could see when people didn't go to work, like if they had a sick day or something like that. The towers at work were not being pinged, and the ones at home were. So it was really very interesting. And so this I'm finding this fascinating. I was wondering if you could tell me. So I'm understanding the side on the decentralized and federated data, providing linkages and access with secure controls, privacy. That is sounding extremely powerful, especially when such low amount of data is being used in today's world. There's definitely a huge volume of improvement there that can be gained. Talk to me about the other side, about the monetization piece that this enables, and what opportunities this opens up.
So a great start is, we do a lot in industrial IoT, which is really about predictive maintenance and being able to understand, the limits of your production systems, and when you may need to bring those production systems down for maintenance. Many customers are finding they're doing too much preventative maintenance. And so the problem is, if you have a supply chain and one of those parts of that supply chain fails, then that can basically, stop a whole range of things. So many people have these scheduled outages where they're taking their systems down, and they probably don't need to do that. But that's preventative to avoid when events are occurring. So the whole idea here is to move from what I'll call an event-driven environment to a predictive environment. And so what you want to do is not have to take outages to stop events, but you only want to take outages when events are more likely to occur. And so this whole predictive analytics gives you a very good way of being able to say, I'm now starting to see some anomalies in my supply chain where I may need to start to look at how I fix these problems before they occur. And that can be everything from the industrial part of it all the way through to, these larger financial systems. You'll see credit card systems go down. And you'll say, how does a highly available system with, multiple parts of redundancy go down? It's normally because you start to see these cascading type of failures occurring. And if you could start to predict these things, you could then probably avoid them, occurring in the first place. And so that's the big difference we're seeing. It's moving from event-driven, and many customers are quite good at, what I'll call event-driven economics, where they have a team of people raiding around when an event occurs. They're very quick at basically being able to address that event. But this is being the predictive, where it says, well, let's not actually let that event occur in the first place. And best example, that's what you're starting to see with smartwatches and human health, which is, what they're finding is before a stroke, before a cardiac event, there's normally a number of predictors that occur before these things occur. So if you can pick up on the predictors, you can probably stop the event from occurring, and therefore stop a lot of the damage and other things happening. So these are the ways that we're starting to see the data becoming, from that event-driven data, where customers are said, and people are quite good at capturing events. What they're starting to see is, I now want to predict events and stop those events occurring in the first place.
That's excellent, because then you're being able to hit the right balance. Because as you were saying, like when it comes to to safety and security, and for example, having a plant running, people are naturally can err on the side of over-investing in safety, and do it essentially too much to the detriment. And in other sides, there's another type of applications. There's predictions that can help find the optimal point. So you guys can help with both of those. And what are other type of applications that you're seeing or that you've been excited about the monetization piece on using data?
So this becomes then what we call secondary or tertiary type market. So understanding the event is occurring, it normally then gives you other events that are likely to occur around that. And so, this can be something as simple as saying, you bought a device that needs batteries. Do you want the batteries to go with that? And that's becoming more and more, every time you click on something on a website, there's that predictive piece that says, other people have looked at this, other people have purchased this around that. So that's that whole secondary and tertiary type ecosystem around those pieces. The biggest area then is basically being able to, provide ongoing, solutions and management for those plans, right? And so this is where, you're looking at different options to provide maintenance or warranty or other type of services around that. And I think that's becoming more and more the trend these days, that you'll buy things more as a service, which will come with a whole range of other, package benefits, rather than just buying a device, for the device itself. So I said it's going to be those mobile phone ecosystems, those smartwatch ecosystems, where it's lifestyle, it's healthcare, it's economic. It can now be used as payment gateways. So all of these things are starting to become those ecosystem type plays, and this is where we're starting to see, unless you can access the data or basically integrate into one of those existing environments, it's going to be very hard for you to compete, just trying to build and develop your own data models internally within an organization.
Definitely. That is so true. The power and the value in ecosystems at the moment is incredible. And I remember years ago, I worked at a large bank, and we had they brought in some consultants from the US that did some research with MIT. And literally their main message was ecosystems. They were like, build ecosystems, get into ecosystems. The power is in ecosystems, but that requires the perspective that you bring in terms of that decentralized and federated data that can be accessible, and as well as protected throughout different players. So this is right on the money. It's extremely exciting. So tell me, how would you so I'm excited to hear about from the Gaia and Gaia X perspective. How would you summarize Gaia and the capabilities that it has? Starting with that, on the capabilities that it has, how would you summarize that for people?
I call it an architecture. So it's a federated architecture where you basically have data, compliance, and identity built together. And so what it is basically showing you is, how you could provide access to data or consume data through an open standards type portal, and basically make sure that the people who are accessing and using that data were adhering to your requirements.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And so it helps build a distributed data model to understand the data where it is, which is very, very interesting. And then what happens when people go to use that data or to request that data? Does the data move? Does it stay in place? How can you tell us a little bit about how it works?
That's right. So more and more we're finding that you're actually starting to move the compute closer to where the data exists, rather than moving large data sets around. So this gives you the ability to deploy an algorithm or an analytics search, very much closer to where the data exists. And so what you're finding around that is that, you can deploy a search into an environment, utilize that environment, and basically pay for the use of that environment. So very much that cloud type approach and model. And then you have a choice whether, depending where you are in the world, and the size of your data set, it may be easy to move that data, or the person sharing that data may not want you to move it, but they may give you access that data to run the analytics piece. And so all that the end user gets is the output of that rather than the access to the raw data. And so you can start to see the subtlety in the models about, then people having control of that. So enabling someone to search through and basically analyze your data is very different to just giving you a full copy of the data, then not being able to control what happens to that data in the future or how they may morph, their usages of that data.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And what happens if there's a lot of computational demand that's moving close to a data set that may not have the right type of, I guess, infrastructure or the computing resources in order to be able to crunch that? And I'm thinking kind of like IoT probably or edge cases. Yeah. What happens in those scenarios?
Oh, this is where the HPE, being a good organization, has an interest in helping provide those environments. And as you say, moving close to IoT environments, if you're talking about video, you may need GPU capabilities and other things to do that. So we're very much in that space of being able to provide you compute GPU resources close to where data is and do it on a per use type basis. So we have a whole range of different solutions. We'd love to talk about how we can start to do that. But this is where we start to see these different solutions popping up. And as people are starting to understand that data pipeline, being able to put compute and analytics as part of that data pipeline makes it more efficient. It makes it lower in latency, and it can improve the performance of it end to end as well.
That's awesome. That's great. And for the people that would be, say, working in Gaia X, what does the platform look like for them?
There's a range of different services, which is that centralized service, which provides you that ability to become part of that ecosystem. There's a whole range of things around the data fabrics. So we can talk to you about many different types of data fabric. So how the data is stored, how the data is accessed. And then we can talk to you about, again, that whole piece around the compute and the processing piece, where you want to do that. Can you bring data to it? Or do you need to start to move your analytics closer to where the data is? And so these type of models is where most people are starting to rethink some of their current architectures and designs. And these new disaggregated or federated design models will mean that, you may not be able to pull all the data across, but you may be able to deploy multiple different analytic searches across multiple data sets much easier in the future.
Wow. Yeah, because then, I guess that's how you guys can provide a customer 360 point of view, and with search, being able to search how many touch points has this customer had across what departments have been in contact with this individual. Obviously, at an organizational level or a government level, that opens up a whole new world of opportunities for organizations without having to move their data or relabel their data, put it all into one place. That must be extremely exciting to see firsthand.
You're starting to see in Australia the newest thing coming in here is around the open banking regulations. And so what this will mean is that a customer, if they choose to share that information, can be made available across a number of different financial service providers.
Yes.
And so the ability then here is to say, if you were going for a loan with one provider and you had different accounts with other providers, then you could basically tick a box and make all of your account information available, so you may get better rates. And so if you've got a good credit record, you're quite happy to make that available to as many people as possible if you believe that will get you a better rate on your loan, etc. Now, that means that all of the people playing in that ecosystems now have to be able to share that open data in a much better format than they had previously. So in many cases, the financial institution would say, that's our core IP, we're not sharing that. And so the government's had to step in and sort of say, well, look, it's really a benefit to the consumer for that information to be available and accessible by other players as well.
That is excellent. That is extremely exciting to be able to kind of like take your data and share it across different organizations. From a personal perspective, I've always thought that would be great to be able to do with addresses, or if you're moving house, have kind of like one central data locker where you have your address information and maybe your email, and you can choose to share that with multiple organizations. So share that with Australia Post, share this with this bank, and if you need to change it only in one place, and everyone can access, or the people that you want them to access.
And this is quite interesting, which is in the old days, people used to think that the federated way of people keeping data, so their records were all kept by these different organizations, enabled better privacy. What you're seeing now is that basically enables a lot more identity theft and everything occurring. If there was a central place that people could check your details, etc., against, and do it in a secure way to say, great, we're just checking to see if everything aligns, and you just get a yes or no answer back, then it would be far better and far safer for the consumer to be able to do that than to have every different entity they deal with having a different record of them or who they potentially are at a point in time. Exactly.
I like that idea of checking against and getting a yes or no back in terms of saying, this is what I have. Is that the latest? That's really good. One of the other things that you mentioned before that I wanted to ask you a bit more is about sovereignty and data sovereignty. How do you see, or how does Gaia X help on that front? It's obviously something important for Australians. How does it help on that front?
Yeah, so it allows you now to basically make those records available for comparison. So when you're doing that, you're not actually providing those records, but somebody can come and query to say, is this Felipe's current address, right? If it's not, it'll just come back with a no. It won't give them your current address, so your privacy is still protected. But if somebody's wanting to, determine whether they trust you and you've given them information and they want to basically say, well, is there a way of me, comparing that information? This is a very easier, good way of doing that. And so it changes. So where we're saying searching data, a lot of these searches will just come back with a yes or a no answer, in many of these cases. But that's all that's required if you're looking to do that authentication. And again, in many cases, what people are looking to do, especially in healthcare, is start to look at, social or environmental impacts. And, this person who's just turned up with diabetes, where have they come from, what environment? They're not really looking for specific information on you, but they're looking for those environmental aspects, which may be leading to the sort of community-based healthcare players. So having a database where you could say, great, here's people who's turning up with diabetes, here's all of the, factors that are impacting this, may then help you, stop that in certain communities or certain areas where, these diseases are becoming a much larger impact on the population. So it gives you a very good way of doing these population-based healthcare. So why is one part of the world not seeing this where another part of the world is? Is it to do with diet, sugar, all of these different areas? You can start to compare those different factors without having to drill down into that personally identifiable information. But you may want to know, what is the, the amount of fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, protein, all these other things they're consuming. How do I get all the information without then, having to basically say, send it all to me and I'll do it.
So there's a lot of innovation that can be powered by this, and there's a lot of improving not only the access to data, obviously, but the access to opportunities for different organizations to bring this innovation. How do you see that coming along, and how do you see that coming to fruition?
Well, that's the whole thing with that digital twin. So, am I doing enough to keep up with newer services coming into the market? In the old days, people saw that there were barriers to entry into many of these markets, and so it was difficult to compete. These days, what you're seeing with newer digital services, you're now seeing digital banks come out, and they're able to offer a service, very different to what you're seeing in the standard, financial services area. And so these things like Afterpay and all these other solutions coming out are very easily able to compete with a credit card company because they're offering a similar service, but they're doing it very differently. It's all digitally enabled. It's all around the transactions around data. Do I trust this person? Are they going to pay me back? All of these can be made, decisions can almost be made on the fly. And so having to, an analog system trying to compete with that, it's very, very difficult. And so these are the areas of that competitive differentiation you talk about, to say, well, hang on, why wouldn't a credit card company, be making more value of their information that they currently have? You as a consumer, they know you pretty well, but they're not offering you the services you want. Is that because there's a lack of competition, or they just haven't thought of those different type of services?
Yeah, that is excellent. That is great. What I was going to ask you, what are you most excited about in terms of the opportunities for Gaia and the data economy, I guess, as a whole? There's a lot there to pick from. So from your perspective, what are you most excited about?
I think it's that ability to see a whole new range of services be made available very quickly, but also customize those services to an individual user's requirement. So when I look at my children, my children won't leave the house till they know where the bus is, right? So I can remember in the old days, you having to turn up at the bus station. If the bus was early or late, that was your fault, right? These days, my son sits in his bedroom, doing work, waiting for the bus to arrive before, he goes to uni. He'll only leave when it's up the street and he walks down and meets the bus, right? So, very different ways of utilizing these services that you'll see coming in the future. And what I call service chaining. So how you can basically start to say, well, I want to start to choose these different services and chain them together myself, will really give the consumer a very good way of being able to customize their own services and choose from multiple different providers as they do that. So I think the days where you can have a single source of everything, or where you just go, it's my one-stop shop, not going to happen, and that you'll start to see this ability to have, ecosystems within ecosystems sort of spring up as people start to understand how they can do that. And the key here is that openness of the data, and typically where you can see that there's value, or where you can know you're providing value, it's easier to, show that value when you've got good data and the ability to say, yes, I'm contacting you or providing you this service for these reasons, and aligning very well with the consumer's requirements as they do that. Now, for digital government, I think it's going to be a lot better. In New South Wales, you're seeing that with what we're doing around, the whole Service New South Wales and how that's linking. And I think you'll start to see a lot better, ways of doing that across Australia. And I think that it's almost been driven by a lot with the COVID as well, right? So you're starting to see how you have to have these ecosystems together, the whole, scanning in and scanning out of environments and all these things. The community benefit of that, when it comes to things like contact tracing, is just, immeasurable. And to be able to do it on an existing device most people carrying with them, it's quite a powerful use of just one part of that technology ecosystem. You could imagine what you could then do, attached on top of that from a government service perspective.
100%. Those are excellent use cases, and I've definitely been impressed with how Service New South Wales has been using this type of technology, implementing it, and for the benefit of people in the state. It's fantastic. Tell me maybe last question, just because I'm struggling with the curiosity. I'm trying to hold back, but I'll shoot it through. So I wanted to ask you about the plans for Gaia over the next, say 3 to 5 years. What do you see coming up?
Yeah, so it's really developing that whole ecosystem and bringing on different partners. What you'll start to see is how you do more of that sort of edge to core to cloud type environment, where organizations will now have a lot more edge processing. And if you look at the Gartners or IDC, they're sort of saying that in the future 80% of all information will be processed very close to where it was actually produced.
Wow.
And that will then give you a very, very different way of being able to do that whole process automation. So that whole robotic process, digital process automation, if I can start to gather data quickly close to where things are occurring, the number of new services that are going to, just spawn out of that will be, just amazing. And so, we're very interested in e-health. So that whole electronic healthcare piece, I think that will, become a very, big area of change as people will be almost signing up to monitoring services with either a telco or a device manufacturer. And then you'll basically be able to be monitored for a number of different, predictive events that we've talked about here, right? So, being able to, look at glucose monitoring through just a finger, scanner and all these type of things. These are the areas that are going to have a massive change to our sort of social welfare. And then, the sky's sort of the limit on the economic side with, companies becoming more and more digital and services becoming more and more digital. So you'll see in areas like insurance, it's all about micro insurance and being able to, insure, different events occurring. And then it's based on that whole event, capturing all the information and saying, great, if I'm going to basically be doing this, how can I protect myself in different ways, right? So I think it'd be a very interesting way that people start to, almost, how much I'm looking for, sort of navigate the new sort of digital services in the future. I think there'll be some very, very interesting, opportunities out there for organizations, for governments, for good and for bad, right? So it's how whenever you offer, this level of innovation, there's going to be good and bad, and it's about making sure that you can, optimize the good and limit the bad.
Exactly. This has been really extremely interesting. The potential is huge. I feel like it comes right at the right time for the Australian market. So many organizations are trying to solve these problems and having difficulty in doing so. It's been very piecemeal solutions so far that have taken a lot of resources to get even to the starting line. So this is going to be, Gaia is going to help out so many people. Yeah. Where can people find out more information, or where can they go from here?
Yeah, a number of different websites. Contacting HPE directly. So again, we've got a number of products that fit into that ecosystem. Just reach out. A number of different ways of doing that. I'm sure the guys will give you some links to whack in at the end of this video, where we can basically show you some of the things we're doing. Very interested to talk, at events and, come and have a chat to different industry groups around how we see this working in other areas and how we can start to help pull all of these different parts together. So the good thing is there are many entry points to this. You don't have to be a large organization or a big government department to start to get the value of these newer ecosystems. They can be very lightweight, very easy entry, but that's the whole idea, which is to enable that access and give you, easy return or quicker returns on a lot of these investments.
Mate, this has been outstanding. Really enjoyed the discussion. I'm impressed by the level of foresight and the capabilities that you guys have brought to reality so quickly and so soon. It definitely is going to help so many organizations in our geography. How it's helped organizations in other parts of the world. So I'm super exciting. And Stuart, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this with us.
No problem, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope that you got a lot out of this discussion. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel so more people can find out about the challenges that leaders have in the analytics and AI space. And that's what we're trying to share in Data Futurology. So please like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Thank you so much.